Hello everyone, I'm Mnar Adley, founder and director of MintCast News. Today I have the honor and pleasure of being joined by Dr. Mohammed Tahir, who is a British-Iraqi trauma and orthopedics and peripheral nerve surgeon. But most importantly, he is a humanitarian, a war surgeon who captured the hearts and minds of the world over when he risked his life to go to our dear Gaza to treat the world's most vulnerable in the face of a genocide. Dr. Mohammed, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Palestinians in Gaza right now are trapped in a killing field with Israel enforcing an illegal blockade. They've systematically targeted, I should say, over 1,400 healthcare workers and hospitals. Hospitals there have run out of blood, antibiotics, and even anesthesia, and Palestinians have run out of food. There is a man-made famine there. Reporting on these facts and statistics is one thing, but I think many people want to hear from you your reaction about this Gaza flotilla, the Madeleine, who is carrying activists, humanitarians who are trying to break that siege. And what's your reaction to them trying to break that siege and the media coverage to it?
Firstly, thank you for having me, of course. It's a pleasure to speak to you, and I thank you for giving me a platform to reach your audience. With respect to the Freedom Flotilla, my first reaction is I suppose that I'm relieved that there are still people out there willing to take a risk in order to break a siege. I think they all know very well the likelihood of them succeeding was very slim. However, that didn't stop them from trying. And that's the illness that we need to overcome in our communities across the world. Everyone is gripped by this sense of not being able to change the outcome. Everyone I speak to says, oh, it's in Allah's hands. Oh, we will make dua. A guy I met the other day, in fact, said to me, Doctor, I watch these videos, but they're just painful. I can't watch them. They're just so difficult. And I said to him, no, you must watch them. You must watch them, and your heart must burn. Your heart must be full of pain, because that is exactly what adaf al-iman is, or the weakest of faith. The weakest form of our faith is to at least carry in your heart those feelings. And of course, you know the hadith of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the ranks of or the strength of belief. If you see an evil, you try to change it with your hand, and if not, with your mouth, by your words, and if not, then at least in your heart. This is the lowest level, is to just feel the pain in your heart. So if you cannot do that, then there is not even any faith. These guys try to change things by their hand, and the irony is none of them, or hardly any of them, are Muslim and Arab. Some of them are of Algerian or Moroccan, I think, extraction, French. But Greta, for example, Tiago, for example, these are humanitarians. So, they really put millions and millions, if not billions, to shame. I'm looking at the reactions of the people of Gaza. They welcome this. They say that even if you were not able to reach physically, you were able to reach in their hearts. And that is still very, very important, because we need to make the people of Gaza feel that they are not alone, and we need to be able to reach them in other ways to give them strength and resolve. And so I welcome the Freedom Flotilla. I think, and I hope it will be the beginning of more, because the people of the world have watched governments be idle, ineffective, or in fact, worse, complicit in this genocide of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And so the people are now taking action. This is what we've been talking about for so long, and I'm glad to see the beginning of it.
And I love what you said about how people who are trying to avoid looking at these videos must look at these videos, because what happens when we're avoiding looking at these videos is we're avoiding the rage that we should be feeling deep down inside of our hearts, in every cell of our being, for the injustice that is being that we're witnessing every single day in Gaza. People are afraid to feel the rage. They're afraid to feel the anger, because what will that make them do? And I hope that when they are able to face that rage and anger and feel through it, they realize that we have to take any sort of action as you described. And, you know, I feel inspired by this Freedom Flotilla, and I feel inspired by the many healthcare workers that have risked everything to be inside of Gaza in the face of this genocide against, you know, one of the strongest military machines in the world. Yet Israel also is a paper tiger. And so I wanted to ask you, what was a day in the life like for you as a humanitarian surgeon inside of Gaza?
You know, they were very, very dark days, very difficult days. You would wake up and you immediately would be completely sleep deprived. You'd never have a full night's sleep. Certainly my team and I never did. And the first thing you would do is go to the OR and start operating on the backlog of patients. And in between those cases, you might hear of a airstrike and mass casualty incident, in which case you would leave the OR, or you'd stop the OR if it wasn't a life-saving operation. You'd run to the ER and you'd help your colleagues deal with the sea of mangled people, women, children, burned, dismembered, disemboweled. I saw beheaded people as well. And you, in that chaos, you're just trying to do your best to preserve life. And oftentimes you see life slipping through your fingertips because you just cannot do what you wish to. You have an overwhelmed system, depleted resources, depleted of any ability to restore life. You know, you felt at times that you were just watching death. And it was difficult. And then in between those cases, you might take an emergency case to the OR, operate on them. Meanwhile, the hospital shakes because of bombing in the courtyard nearby. You hear the loud thunder of the airstrike. I'm operating, and in the distance, I can hear the screams and the cries of patients who are having their dressings changed in some ORs under light sedation, because of course there's not enough of it to go around. But you hear the screaming because of the pain that is involved. You'll finish some cases, when I finish a certain case, if it's outside the like life or death situation, I see a queue of people waiting to see me, waiting at the door of the entrance to the OR. Doctor, I have these injuries, help me. And there's just more and more and more of them. And you just operate. You'd continue operating. Meanwhile, you're with your brothers and sisters who you've developed a close bond with, because you're now united by this evil that you're trying to face and resist. The Israelis are trying to extinguish life, and you and your colleagues are trying to preserve and restore it. And in between all that time, you might try to find a little bit of time to eat. Coffee had to be constant supply, because otherwise we just, the amount of hours that we would work would be impossible. And we keep going and going and going, and before you know it, it's like 4 a.m. and you look around you and the team is exhausted, and you tell your team, right, everyone, it's time, go to rest. And then maybe I would go, depending on which hospital I was in, maybe, in one of the hospitals in the north, I would go to the rooftop of the hospital. It would coincide with the Fajr prayer or even after. And I would just look into the distance. When I was in the north, I would look into the distance, I would see the bombardment of Jabalia. And I would just think, Ya Allah, what is happening in Jabalia? Then I would come downstairs, we would sleep. And if there wasn't an emergency, they'd wake you up again. And you'd be like, just so sleep deprived. And you don't know what to do, but you cannot just let these people suffer. So you literally rip yourself from the bed, or when I say bed, I mean a mattress on the floor, and you go back to the OR. And in that time, you would be treating children with burns so horrific that most of them don't survive. You'll be treating women with limbs mangled, faces destroyed, shrapnel everywhere. Innocent men, also horrific injuries. And it's really difficult, but you actually, after a while, with the amount of time that I spent there, nearly 7 months in total towards the end, certainly in the process, I felt like I was just climatized in dealing with just war injuries. Very rarely did I step out of the hospital. Maybe I visited the local, in the north of Gaza, one of the oldest churches in the world, in fact. I would take my team very rarely to the sea to watch the sunset, to feel the breeze and watch the ocean or the sea rather meet with the sands, and let them feel a little bit of normality. But there wasn't a day that we would come back from those days, I'd go straight back to the OR, because there was just not enough time, and I had to treat thousands of patients. So a typical day would be full of horror, would be full of blood, would be full of watching the cries of men and women over their lost ones. It would be a witness to a slaughter, a genocide, an extinction of human life, overseeing a starvation of people, working in a healthcare facility which was crumbling all around you, but trying to do your best because you feel that this is your duty as a person, as a human, as a Muslim, and just tie your hopes to the will of Allah and do your best.
And recently, I spoke with ICU trauma nurse Willie Masai. I actually met him in person. He was here in Minneapolis, and he also described really horrific things. And being Palestinian myself and having also witnessed buildings of children and families being blown up before my eyes and having my water cut off, and as a teenager, preteen, that was quite traumatizing for myself. And I lived with that trauma for a very, very long time. And so listening to Willie, listening to yourself has kind of re-triggered that trauma. And it just feels so horrific what you both have been through. I can't imagine what all of the healthcare workers have had to endure and see with their own eyes. And so I'm wondering, just from a mental health perspective, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling on a daily basis? Do you feel like you are stuck in that place of fight or flight?
It's difficult. People have asked me that question before. How do you cope with what you've seen? First of all, what I've seen compared to what my colleagues have seen, I cannot compare. I can only imagine how exhausted they are. So exhausted they are after more than 20 months of this, and having to witness all types of slaughter. Because of the period that I spent there, I got to witness, the variety of suffering, if you like. Imagine being, a full-time witness. You see everything, every type of suffering. And then worse, you live it too, because your family are killed, your family are starved, your family are displaced. I remind myself always that whatever I might feel, it's nothing compared to what they feel. I allow my heart to burn with rage and pain. I allow it because it's my duty. But I don't try to turn it off. I try to use it as fuel. I try to use it as motivation. Yeah, there are moments where, people know me. I've been tearful and I've cried and so on and so forth. But this has drawn me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't speak to mental health professionals. You might argue pro or against. Personally, I make my sujood longer, or I make my qunut longer. I speak with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I just try my best. I use every living day, every waking moment in that pursuit now. My life is dedicated to this cause. And no matter what I do for the cause of Gaza and Palestine, it is not enough. People say to me, kafet wafet in Arabic, that you discharge your duty almost, but absolutely not. Because Gaza defends not only its own land, it defends the honor of our ummah. I'm in Iraq right now, so of course the lights have gone off.
Yeah,
I'm still present.
You've gone black on me.
Yeah, I'm still present. Yeah.
Okay.
This is what we experienced in Gaza, of course, operating as well. We would be operating and the lights would go off and we just have to carry on. And if you imagine you're doing a critical part of your operation with no lights, it will come back on in a minute.
And I don't know what happened, but my screen actually just froze. Oh, there it is. Okay. We're back. I mean, we can continue. We can continue. There we go.
Yeah. It's just, these are the problems that we have to experience living in our countries. In the Middle East, in some Middle Eastern countries, I mean, we are sitting on oceans of oil and natural gas, and because our lands are still occupied and under, the direct or indirect rule of empires from the West, we have electricity cutouts and so on. It's just absurd, but yeah. Lights go off. It reminded me of the lights going off in the OR in the Gaza. Imagine doing a critical part of your operation, the lights go off. I then eventually took a headlight for my second mission and third mission, so that I wouldn't have to deal with this problem, so I can just carry on working. But yeah.
And you were saying that Gaza is not just about Palestinians, but it's a fight against. I think you were going to say something about.
Yeah. So Gaza, the people of Gaza are not only defending their land, they are defending the honor of the entire Arab and Muslim world. So whatever we can do to support them, to be of assistance to them, we still are in a state of shortcoming with them. They are really on the front lines, and we have to question ourselves: what are we doing for these people who are sacrificing for their land, but also for our honor and to protect our holy sites? We're in such a terrible state that they ridicule us now. The right wing, Zionists. I suppose they're all really. By virtue of being a Zionist, you're already an aggressor. But the extreme from amongst them, they say, "Oh, we can kill 100 of them now. No one's gonna even bat a lid." And look, initially we had settlers going and prostrating in the Masjid al-Aqsa, and we were waiting for a reaction. There was none. So we did more, and we built a huge tunnel under the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we were waiting. Netanyahu came out and spoke about it. But there was no reaction. And we waved Israeli flags inside. And no one cared. And tomorrow they will destroy Al-Aqsa. And what will be the reaction? This is what we have to, really think about as Muslims, as Arabs, as people who care for human rights. What are we doing? How can we be silent? How can we allow them to do this? Why are we so afraid? Why do they have such control over the persons that claim to be our authorities? On what grounds? What do they have over them? How are they controlling them? What is going on even? And how do we fight back? How do we reclaim our honor, our integrity? How do we defend our brothers and sisters who are being systematically destroyed, annihilated, expelled? Whatever we do for Gaza, it is not enough. In fact, most people do nothing at all, and that's the real tragedy.
Well, and Gaza does represent this modern day fight against colonialism. I mean, colonialism did not die in the 19th century. It's still well alive today. The United States is the modern day colonizer, and Israel, without the United States, wouldn't be able to survive, wouldn't be able to commit this genocide. And so we in the West, especially those living in the United States, like myself, those living in the UK and other Western countries, have a much larger obligation to stand up to their Western governments to end the support for Israel. But this is all, of course, rooted in the military-industrial complex, in this idea of endless war fueling our economies. And so we in the West have to take a much stronger stance, and we have to get over that fear that we may sacrifice something. I remember when I was, marching and organizing with the student protesters here in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota, and I was kind of coaching the students, and I said, what are you afraid of? They said, well, I might get arrested tonight. And I said, well, the people in Gaza are starving. They're living under bombs. They don't have access to medical supplies. The children have their limbs blown off. Parents are holding their children their shredded children in plastic bags. I think the least we can do is get arrested overnight and be released the next day. That's the least we can do here in the West, because that's really what is happening, is that's one of the worst consequences, that we get arrested here for protesting, for disturbing the business as usual for these weapons manufacturers, but typically we're released the next day. And these jail cells are probably more humane, as horrific as they are in the United States. They're probably still more humane and safe than what the people in Gaza are going through. And so I definitely agree with you on, questioning what is it exactly that we're willing to sacrifice and, give up for the people of Gaza. I want to talk more about this idea of modern day colonialism, because, you're British, Iraqi, and, I know you go back and forth from the UK and from Iraq. The UK just recently released like a spy plane to spy on the Gaza Flotilla, the Madeline Gaza Flotilla. And they've been helping arm Israel in aiding that genocide, while we have politicians kind of giving lip service about how they care about human rights. I mean, what do you have to say about that?
It takes me back to the debate, really, about how do we deal with this problem. We are in a state where we have, you can almost think of this analogy as a body, as a human body, which is being attacked by a virus, by a cancer, whatever you might call it. And the question is, do we bolster our immunity, or do we try to cut off the virus or the cancer cells? And of course, the answer is both, right? By working within our own lands to strengthen our communities, to, embolden our people to want to do more for Gaza, we are working on our own immunity. But that doesn't stop the attack from the outside, the cancer, the virus. And so we have to find ways, particularly the people that can change things, we have to find ways to stop this. There are British Palestinian sympathizing activists who are working on weapons manufacturers in the UK, trying to stop them from functioning almost, and have tried to successfully, they've actually successfully closed down their facilities on a number of occasions. That's one form of activism. But without doubt, the people in the West need to do more. It's hypocritical that the UK government, in one hand, offers espionage and surveillance and all sorts to the Israelis in order to enable them to conduct their atrocities, and also are part of the process for some weapons and so on. Despite the fact that, you know, the ICJ have said that the Israelis may, you know, there's a plausible case against them that they might be committing genocide. I mean, if it was anyone else, you know, just imagine. If it was anyone else, it would be impossible to consider that they would still arm them. So it really bothers me. It's like, well, why? You know, what is going on behind the scenes here? What do they have? What's this control that they can make all these Western governments forget all the rules that they supposedly created post-World War II in terms of the Geneva Conventions and human rights and so on? They're all tossed out of the equation, you know, thrown in the garbage. Whatever Israel wants, they can do. So it's really a problem, you know, and we have to pull up our politicians, our leaders, and make them answer to this question: why? Why are they not standing up for human rights? Why are they not calling this genocide? Why are they continuing to arm? I mean, the position of the US is just frank complicitness, you know. I mean, they're just hand in hand in the genocide. I mean, they're giving them all the weapons and everything. They could stop this war. The Americans could stop this war today. It just needs their leadership to see the humanity of the people of Gaza, to have had enough, to believe in the values that the Americans purportedly call for. You know, Americans say that they believe in freedom and freedom of speech and the equality of man and all of these values, which, you know, we all share as humans. But why is Gaza? Why do these rules not apply to Gaza? Why do you throw out the rule book in terms of protecting the innocent and so on when it comes to the aggressions of Israelis? You know, I'm actually quite glad that there is a lot of, you know, oddly, right-leaning Americans calling out Israel massively on social media. I mean, they're sick of it. Very influential and important persons are speaking out. The tide is changing. We have to believe it. It's only a matter of time. I mean, this genocide has unveiled the true ugly face of Israel that you and I have known all along, but many people have been unaware of or just not informed on. They are now. Israel cannot undo this. Whatever PR machine they try to employ, even if they try to influence AI as well, we have incidents where the AI that they've tried to design in order to be pro-Israeli has now gone against them because they speak. You know, if you have to speak the truth, then there's no truth or world of justice where Israel is doing what Israel is doing is correct by any means. No, in fact, not. Israel is committing horrific crimes, and this is this. In fact, it's destroying the very fabric of societies across the world. And so, at some point, the West must ask itself, you know, when is enough enough? How much more loss can they take to their credibility, to their image? How much more can they sustain? And I think, you know, tide is turning.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that what this genocide has really exposed is the moral depravity of Western countries who have for so long tried to sell to the public this idea of humanitarian warfare or, you know, exporting democracy in places like Syria or Yemen or Libya, for example. They may have been successful in, you know, drawing people's support, like we got to go save those people, and there's, you know, major human rights abuses, or even the Iraq War. I mean, I lived through in high school watching the United States drum up support after 9/11. I think I was younger than that, actually, but I was there watching in a post 9/11 world, the United States with President Bush draw support for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that killed over 2 million people. I mean, the United States did use chemical weapons. They did destroy those countries. They committed horrific war crimes against women and children. They used starvation as a weapon of war. And so I always say to people, and I know that you know this, Dr. Tahir, but Israel is just a representation of what U.S. imperialism truly represents. But now, because it's being live streamed, we're seeing the raw face of it all on our screens. And people are really questioning, like you said, not just U.S. support for Israel, but they're really becoming aware of just how that military-industrial complex works. And of course, none of this would be possible without the government stenographers like the BBC or CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times pushing that atrocity propaganda to dehumanize the victims of our war. What has been your experience with the media? Have they tried to contact you to hear what you've been through in Gaza?
So just firstly, in response to what you said, the Americans and the Brits have, of course, they've committed crimes across the world, and notably in Iraq. But at least there are some incidents where, American soldiers have been kind, have tried to build relationships with the local communities. I'm talking at soldier level.
Yeah.
And many soldiers have gone back and spoken out against the wars and so on, because they're, some of them were fooled into coming to Iraq. But that's not the truth or the same for Israel. Israel is the rabid dog of American colonialism. Israeli soldiers are full of spite and pain, and they're killing thirst. They go and destroy homes, and they wear women's clothes, and they hang dolls, and they do gender reveals by blowing up people's buildings and all manner of depravity, and they take satisfaction by killing and maiming, and it's these are different crop of persons. If a person is a suitable adjective to describe these people. It's they're on another scale. They really are, and the statistics that are coming out of Israel are also very telling. You have about 80% of Israeli population want to see all of Gazans ejected from their land. You have about 60% who believe in Amalek for the Gazans. Now, of course, anyone who is familiar with this topic will tell you Amalek is a incident historically that's described in the Old Testament, where the Israelites took on the Canaanites, the people of Amalek rather, and they killed every man, every woman, every child, every animal, and not even the plants were safe from them. And 60% believe that's an appropriate method of treating the Gazans. I mean, what's that telling you? And also, about 40% believe that all the Arabs who have Israeli citizenship or nationality, what we call the 48ers, who are living in part of society, all those guys should be removed as well. This is more than just a soldier problem. This is more than just a Netanyahu problem. This is a societal problem that they have in Israel. With response to the media, I have had more interest in media across the Middle East, and from people who, some platforms such as yourself. I have to speak on, for example, Dr. Victoria Rose, who is a friend and colleague. Remarkable person, who's been to Gaza many times, has been in Gaza lately, was a witness. She operated lots and lots and tried to help as many people as she could. I think she did a three-week mission. And since she's been out, she's actually been doing very well to spread the message in Western media. And of course, now she's a Caucasian. Her name's Victoria. So she's had platforms like CNN, BBC, ITV News, Channel 4 News. You know, I had very small amount of interest from Western media outlets. BBC maybe a few times, ITV maybe a few times, Sky News, but nothing like this. And I'm actually very proud of Dr. Victoria Rose for doing this. And I think it's important that she's doing this, but you have to remember, my name is Mohammed. And so when they look at me, you know, I'm not really British, am I? I mean, that's what, let's face it, they don't think I'm British. You know, they don't believe I'm British. And so, hey, it's fine. I mean, I still have to do my duty, and I speak to the people that I represent, which are the Iraqis. And I speak to the people of the Middle East. And I still try to reach people of the world, but, you know, through my own social media presence now. The media in general, you know, the Western media outlets, you know, are complicit as well. You know, there's been a recent change in tone. It's almost as if, you know, it's almost as if someone's given them the green light.
Yep, it feels like it. You can see a shift.
Yeah, for me, my analysis of this is post Trump's visit to the Middle East. There's a little bit of friction between Netanyahu and him. I mean, that could have been a facade in order to make it more palatable for the Arab public that he's coming and extracting trillions of dollars from the Middle East. So if, you know, on the surface, there's friction between Trump and Netanyahu, it's not so bad. But the reality is, you know, they're still on the same side. But maybe there's a little bit of a push from some of the Arab leaders, at least some of them. In fact, one of them was pushing more than the others to try to reverse the situation in Gaza. And maybe there has been a green light to the UK and Europe that you can start talking more publicly. And you suddenly saw a shift in David Lammy, and you suddenly saw a shift in Keir Starmer, and you suddenly saw a shift in the Western media. And we have to think about these things. Sometimes we just take things at face value. No, you have to understand what's going on behind the scenes and analyze and be critical. It's chess. It's you know, it's a game. It's mind games. You know, pulling wool over our eyes and so on and so forth. And they're masters at this. You know, for God's sake, they invented Hollywood. So we have to be smarter. We have to be more aware. We have to look at reliable news outlets that are trustworthy, that are doing a great job like yourself, and support them because without them, really, and I speak also for the journalists in Gaza who have given their lives to you know, for this cause, to tell the world what's happening to them. Without them, we would be living in the dark. You know? So it's so important that people are aware and rely on authentic, genuine news and media outlets.
Of course. And, you know, the importance of independent media is, like, right now, it's so important to follow and support independent media outlets because we truly are up against a not just billion-dollar propaganda machine, but trillions of dollars propaganda machine that is used to push war narratives and divide and conquer us so that we can, you know, argue between ourselves while they get the wars moving. And so something I want to bring attention to and talk about is the way in which this war in Gaza, this genocide, has really united Muslims in a way that kind of destroys and breaks through that fog of war, breaks through that divide and conquer sectarian narrative that has been pushed to divide Muslims since the onset of the war in Iraq, when the United States invaded Iraq. And with the rise of ISIS and groups like Al-Nusra Front and Al-Qaeda and others who were, you know, backed and supported by the West by proxy inside of Syria to push that sectarianism. And so we're seeing now Muslims uniting against sectarian lines, political lines, religious lines, you name it, in the name of defending Gaza. And even in Yemen, factions that were, that had been in support of the Saudis or even the UAE have actually put down their arms and joined Ansar Allah in the fight against Israel. I mean, it's truly amazing what has been happening. And as somebody who has family who are both Sunni and Shia, it's amazing to see people unite. And so recently, you wrote, if you truly wish to defeat the $1 trillion spent to divide and conquer the Arab and Muslim world, then know this. It all begins with one simple act. Remove sectarianism from your heart. Shia and Sunnis are brothers. We worship the same Lord, follow the same prophet, believe in the same holy book, face the same qibla, and share the same belief in the hereafter. I mean, that's so beautiful, the way you wrote that. Can you expand on that unity that is so needed right now?
It's so vital that we are united. It's truly a remarkable thing that the Palestinian cause is a rallying cry for all Muslims of all denominations. And that's why it's so important. It's a uniting force. It's a uniting energy. I really truly believe that if we were united, then none of this would be able to happen to us. And of course, their rule it's no secret that they employ a strategy of divide and conquer. They've done it to us for hundreds of years. And it really is as simple as looking at yourself in the mirror or thinking to yourself, being critical of oneself and just asking, do I look at my Muslim brother who might be Sunni or Shia, and do I think of them as any less? Do I think of them as being any less worthy of defending? Do I have a hatred in my heart towards them? Why? And who made it such? And if that's okay, then you really should be asking yourself, how do you arrive at that situation? Because it's not okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never asked of us to be split according to so many different factions. And certainly our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always called upon us to be united. No matter our color, of course, at that time we were all one homogeneous block. But the idea of us being split, it was always something abhorrent. But the reality is that we have people have different readings of history. And that's fine, You're entitled to that. This is what we have to understand, that you're entitled to have a reading of history, and if it sits well in your heart and your conscience is clear, then that's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not for me to come and point fingers at you, but there are akhlaq of a Muslim. And our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent as a mercy to mankind. Can you ever imagine our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing any of the things that people purport to be his followers? And I mean, these factions like ISIS and so on, impossible. It's a completely different faith system. This is not Islam anymore. This is something completely different. And so when you see this, you have to ask, where did it come from? And we know the reality that these are all Zionist created or CIA created projects. We know this. These are no secrets anymore. People are waking up to it in this world where information is being shared and disseminated very easily. Causes like Palestine, like Gaza, has become the litmus test, and it's made us aware of who is really for Islam and who is against it. And so really this sectarianism in our heart, it must be remedied. We must extract it and remove it and discard it. And we must look at each other as brothers, or sisters, for God's sake. I use this analogy sometimes. Just imagine for a second you're of one you're of one denomination. You go to a planet, let's say Mars, and you meet people there on Mars, and you ask them, okay, what's your religion? And they say, yeah, I believe in Allah, and I believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa and I have this book called the Quran, which I follow as guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, I believe in Al-Akhirah, I believe in the Day of Judgment, I believe in the unseen. At this point, you're going to say, well, hey, I believe in all those things too. And my God, we're brothers, we're sisters, we're the same people. If they then go off and tell you the minutiae might be a little bit different, fine. But I'm not going to ignore all of these other points which bind us together. And so that's how we should be seeing it. Like, even if you're from another world, I mean, we have so much more in common, certainly more in common than what the others who want to destroy us have. Our mistake is that we have allowed self-interest, we've allowed the greed, desire of this world to become priorities in our lives, and not our unity, not our oneness. And as I said, if you truly want to overcome billions and trillions of dollars spent to destroy the Muslim Ummah, then it's simply one thing, and that is to remove sectarianism from your heart and to be united.
And I hope that that's the direction that the Muslim and Arab world take. I think, over the last decade or so, we've seen a lot of division and divisiveness and a lot of sectarianism kind of tear through even the Palestinian solidarity movement. If you critiqued any sort of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Syria, for example, and press has been kind of at the forefront of looking at, the United States involvement inside the war of Syria and arming certain rebel factions. And because of the propaganda machine, that has divided people to such an extent that if you critiqued U.S. foreign policy in Syria, you were labeled as pro-Assad, or you must be pro-Iran or pro-Shia, when it was just more critique of U.S. foreign policy. But I think a lot of that is kind of coming to an end. I hope it is, especially with the way that the war in Gaza has unfolded, and the way in which, the new Syrian leadership is cozying up to the state of Israel. And it's like everything that we've said that would happen inside Syria is happening. And so have you personally experienced any sort of, I guess that's actually, I don't want to ask that question. I actually want to go, because I know we don't have a lot of time left. I want to go more into the history of Iraq and its solidarity with, of Palestine. And if you could share, give us a little bit more insight, excuse me, give us a little bit more insight on the history of Iraq supporting Palestine, and what is Iraq doing today to support Palestine?
Yeah. Iraq has a long history of supporting Palestine. I mean, we were even there in the beginning of the first Nakba, trying to defend the lands. We have fallen soldiers in Jenin. We even have a title of Abu Khalil given to Iraqi soldiers who came to Khalil as well to try to defend those lands. Not a lot of people know that actually what's known as the Palestinian Kafiyya or Kufiyya is actually of Iraqi origin. And that's a testament to the bond between our people. It was brought over by the Iraqi soldiers at the time, and was adopted by the Palestinians. And you can read up on this. But it's a thing that when we see our brothers in Palestine, where it makes us feel united, makes us feel as if we are one people. Iraq has, of course, over the decades, always been in support of Gaza, and always been in support of Palestine. We remain as one of the single countries, Arab countries left, which reject normalization. It's a criminal offense to speak of it. That's not to say that there is not an underground effort by the Israelis to try to seduce the Iraqis into this idea. And that's particularly the case in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish zones. And this is not an attack on them. There are many, many Kurdish Iraqis who are completely against the idea of Israel and normalization. But it's no secret that Israelis are working with the, unfortunately, in the Kurdish zones. Because they sell them the dream that, we will sponsor your ideas for liberation and freedom or independence. But, they never are out, for your own interests, my dear Kurdish brothers in the north who believe in this. They are completely using you, and you must never trust them. And so it's a difficult situation up there. That's not to say also that they're not also present even in Baghdad, undercover, trying to influence things. And that's why my voice must be used here to reject that. And I speak of it now with force to reject any idea of normalization. I mean, our people are completely against it anyway, but just to reiterate the point. When I came out of Gaza, I went and I met our Prime Minister, and I asked of him, I said, when I was in Gaza, I looked and I saw that there was a Turkish hospital and an Indonesian hospital, a European hospital, there was an Emirati field hospital, a Kuwaiti field hospital, but I never saw the Iraqi hospital. Why? Our people have long, long history. I said, we should build the Iraqi hospital. And he said to me, we shall do it. And we started to, try to get the ball rolling. I spoke to the guys in Gaza about the plans, but then the war started again and the killing started again. So we cannot proceed. But we want to have the Iraqi hospital in Gaza. And now I'm working in Iraq, and I want to have the Gaza hospital in Baghdad to reinforce our oneness as people, to reinforce that we love Gaza and we are with Gaza. We will die for Gaza. I walk the streets and people say, it's interesting. They say, Dr. Mal Gaza or Abu Gaza. I'm in Iraq, I'm the doctor of Gaza. In Gaza, I'm the Iraqi doctor. I am a servant to both people, both nations, our ummah, in fact. I work, inshallah, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I try to keep this bond alive. I try to make sure that no one can break this bond between our people. And I tell you, there is so much love for me in Iraq now. And that's primarily because I went and I helped the people of Gaza when they couldn't. Both people, both nations, our ummah, in fact. I work, inshallah, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I try to keep this bond alive. I try to make sure that no one can break this bond between our people. And I tell you, there is so much love for me in Iraq now. And that's primarily because I went and I helped the people of Gaza when they couldn't themselves. Iraqis are not allowed into Gaza. Iraqi citizens are not allowed to go on medical missions. Believe me, if they were, they would have flooded the area. Because we love Gaza, we stand by Gaza and Palestine, and we will do so until our last drop of blood.
That's beautiful. And I want to end by just talking briefly about the legacy of Imam Hussein, because I know that is a very strong tradition in countries like Iraq, and that drives a lot of love and hope for the people of Gaza. How could you share with us just the story of Imam Hussein and the tragedy of Karbala and the connections you've made public about that in terms of what's happening in Gaza?
Imam Hussein, salamullah alayhi, he is the grandson of our dear Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is the son of Ali and Fatima alayhim salam. The Arabs used to mock our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They used to say, "Innahu abtar," as in he is without lineage. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, fasalli li rabbika wanhar, inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar." Indeed, we have given you the Kawthar. In our belief, Fatima al-Zahra the daughter of our Prophet, is the Kawthar, and it's also a fountain in paradise. And it says that the person who shuns you is the one without lineage, because through Fatima al-Zahra, he was given Al-Hasan al-Hussein, alayhi salam, who our Prophet said that they are the masters of youth of paradise. Imam Hussein lived in the time of a tyrant, much like our Netanyahu of today, who wanted allegiance, who wanted him to bend the knee. And Imam Hussein refused, because he would not bend his knee to someone who defies the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out in the open. And he took a stand. He said that death was sweeter than a life of humiliation. And he traveled from around these times, in fact. He left after Al-Hajj, made his journey started his journey towards Al-Iraq. In that time, unfortunately, the Muslims who promised him that they would support him betrayed him. Under the pressure and under the violence of the governors of those lands. And he arrived in a place called Karbala in Iraq today, with only his dear companions, close companions, and his brothers and his sons and his nephews, and he brought along with him his wives and their women. And there were only 100 of them. And they stood on the plains of Karbala, and he made a cry that echoes throughout the centuries, which is Hal min nasirin yansurna. Min della, that be away from us, humiliation, is a rallying cry. And he was killed. Before he was killed, all his companions were killed. His brothers were killed. And Al-Abbas, one of his brothers, had both of his arms cut off. In fact, he had reached the river because they were cut off from the water and they were all thirsty for 3 days. And he battled and forced his way to the water to get the water for the children. And when he reached the water, he took a scoop of it and he brought it close to his mouth. And he thought and he remembered the thirst of Imam Hussein. And he said that he could not do that. He could not taste water with knowing that Imam Hussein and all the children and all the women were thirsty, and he threw it. And he filled his water container and tried to make his way back to the camp, and in doing so the enemies of Allah attacked him and they cut off his arms one after the other. It's a sword battle, of course, and killed him too. And Imam Hussein then found himself without anyone. He took his child, who was an infant, and he raised him, and he said, can you at least give this child some water to drink? And they shot the child, his son, Abdullah al-Radi', in his arms with an arrow which cut him from one side of his neck to the other and killed him. And then Imam Hussein was then faced the enemy head on by himself, and he fought valiantly like his father, Imam Ali. And then he was also overcome with arrows and spears and swords, and they killed him in the plains of Karbala. And before his death, he saw that they burned the tents which housed all the women, the wives and the daughters. And then they killed him. They beheaded him about And they beheaded him, and they beheaded all of the men, and they put their heads on spears, and they trampled on the bodies with the hooves of their horses, and they took their women as captives. And so people ask me, what's the relevance of this to Gaza? Gaza is alone, like Imam Hussein was. It cries for help, like Imam Hussein cried for help, not knowing that, he knew he was facing martyrdom, but it was a cry that would echo throughout the centuries, much like the people of Gaza do today. They are starved and they are thirsty, like Imam Hussein and his companions and his family and all the women of the camp were. And when I think of Imam al-Abbas and how his hands were cut off, I think of the children whose arms I had to amputate and whose limbs I had to amputate. And I think of the betrayal of Imam Hussein, and I think of how the people have betrayed the people of Gaza. And I think of how a powerful tyrant that faced Imam Hussein was, and the powerful tyrant that faces the people of Gaza. And so for me, Gaza is modern day Karbala, and this cause is one that transcends nationalism. It's meaningful in so many different ways. And so I speak about the story of Imam Hussein. Remember, Imam Hussein is for all Muslims. All Muslims. He does not belong to a single sect. He's for all of us. His story is for all of us. This is not a sectarian thing. This is a Muslim thing. In fact, it's a human thing. Many people, historians, have written about Imam Hussein from non-Muslim backgrounds. Gandhi, for example, mentioned him. Even Nelson Mandela mentioned him. So Imam Hussein is a figure in history which stands up for justice and for freedom and against oppression and injustice. It's the concept that you can acquire glory in death. It's a concept that shows that blood is mightier than the sword. It's a concept which shows that in the end that they can kill your body and destroy your body, but they cannot kill your cause. And just like Imam Hussein's cause has lived on for centuries, inshallah, Gaza and Palestine will do too.
Inshallah. And that was a very beautiful explanation and storytelling of what happened in Karbala with Imam Hussein, and connecting that to what's happening in Gaza. What's happening in Gaza is truly a tragedy, and I would love to continue this conversation. I actually didn't get to finish all my questions for you, but I know that we both don't have a lot of time, so perhaps we can continue this in another conversation, another podcast. But yeah, inshallah. For myself as a Palestinian and for all of the people of Palestine, we consider you our doctor. We thank you for all that you've done for Gaza. You've left me emotional with this last story comparing Karbala, but thank you so much, Doctor, for all of your work, and I hope that we can continue this conversation very soon.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.